never really ventured too much into Shakespeare. I think the first performance I saw was Hamlet at the Globe when I was about 14. And then I studied Romeo and Juliet in school, which has worked out quite well for this project. But other than that, I've never really veered towards it because I was scared of it, you know, because it was hard when I first studied it and it's hard now. It's one of those things that the more that you read and the more that you see, the more you will understand it, and it will just make any kind of rehearsal process so much easier if you're already familiar with the language. So when it comes to Shakespeare, knowing where to start is probably the hardest part. So here is a little how-to guide with a few steps that we think are crucial for your development. Context. I cannot stress enough how important it is to know the context of what you're saying, because Shakespeare's works aren't written in modern English as we'd recognise it. Sometimes what you're saying doesn't actually mean what you may have first thought it meant. So doing that research first and foremost above everything is so important. Before we even got both of our plays up on their feet, we had a couple of weeks set for contextual table reads, and both of my scripts have notes on them on every single page next to every single line, because it is also so important to know the context of the scenes that you're not in, because that will help your character intentions to know what's going on when you're not there.
In the first few rehearsals, it was just our director that did it with us. He went through the context, then we did a read through, and then he'd go through anything that was said wrong or anything that he thought that we didn't quite understand properly. So we need to, like, when doing Shakespeare, you need to understand everything you're saying, so it's so much easier when you understand your context. So we went through that quite a bit.
Translate the text. One of the first things that I do when I get a Shakespeare text of any kind is to literally translate it from Shakespeare English to modern English. And by literally searching the act and the scene, you can find pages of websites that do it for you.
When translating Shakespeare, I always use the website Know For Your Shakespeare. This is a website that has every single one of Shakespeare's plays, and all you need to do is type in the play you're looking for and what act you're looking for, and it will be there in the Shakespearean language and in the modern day language. This is so beneficial because it means you can actually understand what your character is saying and everything else that's happening in the scene. But knowing what your character is saying just means that you can start to understand their intention and what they're actually trying to do, which helps you bring so much more truth to your performance. So it's really great.
It is such a quick thing to do, but it is so beneficial to your understanding of the play, because once you know the language, you can start to marry that up with subtext and intentions and things like that, and it just brings the whole scene to life a bit more, because you're not thinking, I need to speak in Shakespeare. Understand the scene. So once you know the context and you know the language, that would already make this 10 times easier. So take the time to isolate each scene and look at it as a whole.
It's kind of vital that you understand what's going on in the scene and where the other characters are coming from. So if you can understand the other characters' objectives, you can feel out how your character fits into that scene, and it helps the performance feel more authentic and organic and like it's coming to you in the moment because you've done so much research on your scene.
And then another thing to look at is the relationships to other characters. How do you feel about them and how close are you to them? This can affect the way that your character behaves and acts. So really taking the time to look into all of these things is so beneficial because it really helps to bring a truthful performance alive.
Uncover the character. So at this point you're kind of getting a pretty banging scene, right? So now just relax into it. Take the idea of Shakespeare out of the equation and just treat your character as a human being with feelings and emotions that are all real and valid in that scenario. Because you have the confidence that you know what's going on, you know why it's going on, you know everything about that. So now just treat your character as a person.
Think about you. Think about how you would react in these situations. Think how think about how you would feel emotionally in that character's shoes. Don't think about how you would feel as that character. Think about how you personally feel, and then put that into your character. Because it's all okay to be like, well, he'd react that way, but you yourself would react completely different. That's okay, but to make something really believable, the easiest thing to do is react as close as yourself as possible. Now, I'm not saying forget about being a character and just be you. I'm saying put as much as you into that character, because it'll make it more believable. So if you react one way and it's similar to how you feel like this character would react, brilliant.
I didn't do that for about a month into rehearsals, and once I actually started treating him as a person, it just elevated my performance so much, because I was able to connect with him more and actually think, oh, okay, so he feels a certain way about this topic and this has happened to him, which makes him think that, you know? So it does help. Trust. It's just so beneficial to actually treat your character as a human being, because in that situation in their life they are. Shakespeare wrote in verse or in prose, with most of his plays being written in blank verse, which echoed the pattern of natural speech, but doesn't rhyme, unlike rhymed verse does. Within blank verse he would use iambic pentameter,
which is a line of a verse with 5 metrical feet made up of one short or unstressed syllable followed by one long or stressed syllable. So an example of this would be 2 households both alike in dignity, or shall I compare thee to a summer's day.
Sometimes this pattern would change and there would be an extra syllable, for example, so the line would have 11.
That can mark something important for a character, something that you need to look out for later on in the show. Yeah, so you need to watch out for when the pattern changes. Something else that he does is he has rhyming couplets, so that is a pair of rhyming lines. This tends to be put in to like give the scene a bit of like a flourish or a little bit of a finesse.
On the flip side to that, you'll find that some characters and some parts of text were written in prose, which has no rhythm to the line, no meter, no structure, so it was regarded more as everyday language. And most of the time that would be reflective of a lower class character, but that rule isn't reflective of every bit of prose you see. So just be careful of that and just read over who is saying it and who they are. So the way that I see punctuation in Shakespeare is that if you want a hack almost of understanding your character's intentions, then highlight the punctuation, because Shakespeare wrote with the delivery of the line in mind, so the punctuation can tell you a lot about how the line should be delivered. So for example, obviously a full stop is the end of a thought, a new thought, take a breath, right?
You don't have to have like a full-on pause every time, but just ensure you have that change in here. Make sure that's evident, that it's like, okay, this is something different, rather than, okay, that could have been a comma.
A comma is a slight pause and reflecting your character's thought process.
We're all taught this in like English class. It's a pause. Use it. Don't just go full steam ahead. Actually use that pause and be like, and continue. You know what I mean?
A repetition of commas is requesting an emotional investment in the line and to build the rhythmic intensity of it. So yes, know your emotional context for that. An exclamation mark is obviously a shout or a cry or asking for extra emphasis on a line. Question mark, answer to a question, unless it's rhetorical. Colon is usually used to show that the line is in response to the previous line. So just use that to actually respond to yourself in a way. And then a semicolon is obviously the same as a colon, but we use a comma to pause, right?
Also watch out for enjambment, where the line continues on to the next line. Don't pause, carry on. Because you want to stop because it looks like the end of the line, but it's not. If there's no punctuation at the end of that line and you're, like say in verse, carry on. Because otherwise it will not make sense. You need to continue and keep going. Because otherwise it's like blah 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 blah. Blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. Blah blah blah. But it should flow. It shouldn't be stuttery and jolty because it's jarring.
So by just highlighting the punctuation of your lines can really help in knowing the delivery of the lines. I know it helped me. It really did. I use a lot of colons and a lot of repetition of commas in some of the friar's speeches, so that just gave me an idea to actually then build the emotion throughout the line and to respond to what I needed to respond to, which just made my development of my subtext a lot easier. So hopefully that has given you a bit of a kickstart into knowing where to begin and what to look at with Shakespeare. So I hope that was helpful, and remember to just take the seriousness out of it and to just enjoy it.